Star Wars is officially back after a 30-year hiatus. Everything Star Wars stood for has finally returned. A new story in a saga in a galaxy far, far away, exploring new depths and new worlds, telling a larger-than-life, amazingly phenomenal story. Star Wars is officially back.
Nothing really matters to me.
Now, before I go on any further, I want to give a little disclaimer that this review does contain spoilers for the film. So if you have not seen the film, I advise you go see it before you watch this review, as it'll make the experience all the more magical. But if you don't care about spoilers or you already have seen the movie, then you may continue on watching. Now, if you're like me and you are concerned about the fate of Star Wars in Disney's hands after The Force Awakens, do not worry, Rogue One puts all those fears down. I can't guarantee you the fate of the rest of the Star Wars movies, but I can say that Rogue One is absolutely an amazing movie. I went into this movie saying I wasn't gonna like it just because it was a Star Wars movie. After what happened with The Force Awakens and how I realized I was unable to initially admit my disliking of the film, either because of somewhat of a loyalty to the franchise, or because at the time it just felt wrong to not like the movie, and was vigorously shunned by everyone else. So I went into this movie saying that I wouldn't let that happen again, and I went in with a very critical eye. And Rogue One is anything but a perfect movie. There was a point while watching where I said to myself, I'm not liking this movie. There are flaws with dialogue, directing, and all things alike. Yet Rogue One still finds its way to become one of the best movies in the franchise. Now I'm going to start out with the flaws, my major flaw of the film being the pacing in the beginning. I like the opening scene, however after that the film didn't start out well. The pacing got really jumpy and I'd compare it to a more focused version of the theatrical cut of Batman vs Superman's pacing. It was like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and now this happens. And it took me out of the film for a bit. However, once the team is taken to Saw Gerrera's prison and Jyn Erso sees Galen's message, the film starts to get really good. However, for a film you really need to pay attention to start out with a bad beginning, it really doesn't help out. Other than that, and a few cheesy lines and unclear dialects, I don't really have any major problems with Rogue One. There are some problems I'm sure anyone could point out, but I don't really feel like diving deep into them if there isn't any major flaw present. Like, I don't know, basically re-releasing an entire movie to then receive $2 billion and a ton of praise. But outside of the film, I do have to say that the trailers for this movie are not at all representative of how good this film is. In fact, I think they do quite a disservice to the film, and aren't as exciting as some other trailers for some other movies that aren't as good. Story-wise, going into this, I was really afraid Rogue One would be the Jyn Erso show, or essentially really centric on Jyn Erso, who at the time of the trailer seemed to be another Mary Sue badass with attitude, or basically the unlikable Rey, which she is far from. And it's not Jyn Erso's movie. It's hard for me to explain, but it isn't a solo movie and it isn't a really focused on team movie. It focuses on teamwork and Jyn is the main character, but you never feel as if she's being pushed on you or that this is her story and her story alone. Best way I can put it is that it's a Star Wars story, telling the story of the rebellion and the legends behind the original trilogy. That's certainly not the best definition of the film, but it's the best I can do. I really like how Rogue One feels so realistic. One of the qualities I love about the DCEU is that it seems like it takes place in a universe that feels real. It makes you believe that it could really happen. One of the best qualities about Rogue One is that the story isn't afraid to go there. No one is safe, aka everyone dies. In most movies it's clear that if you're the main character, you're safe. In the original trilogy it was clear that if you were Luke, Han, or Leia, you were basically safe. Call it the luck of the Force.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
In another Star Wars movie, some people are so connected with the Force that they're basically invulnerable. Even people not connected to the Force can survive impossible circumstances. However, in Rogue One, everyone dies. And it's not in some way where it feels forced on you, it's just simply the price of war and exemplified dying fighting for what you believe in. Something I think that real soldiers or anyone who puts their life on the line for a cause can agree with. And it's something that I would have done if I had made the film. The ending really gets to you and hits you with the feels. I felt myself tearing up. I didn't ultimately, but I was on the verge. They really got you to feel for each character in those moments, and it was a really sad, emotional scene. Character-wise, hands down, my favorite character is K2SO. He had the best lines, and I loved his design and the backstory behind him, how he was a reprogrammed Imperial droid. He served as the comic relief of the film, but what I was so glad to see was that his jokes and his lines did not seem so forced on you. One of my favorite scenes is when Jyn shoots the other popular K2 model droid, and K2SO says, "Did you know that wasn't me?" He's basically the cooler C-3PO. Donnie Yen's character was also a standout. The action scenes were amazing. I also like the religious aspects of the Force his character brings up. My other favorite part of the film is when the team is being captured in Jeddah City by Saw's men, and the men put bags over everyone's faces, and Donnie Yen's character says, "Seriously, I'm blind." However, a complaint I have about the character is that he was a cool side character, and only a cool side character. So much so that I don't even remember his name, or even know much about him. Felicity Jones did a great job as Jyn Erso, and Diego Luna did a good job as Cassian Andor, but it didn't really make me scream for more. It was just an alright performance. I did like that first scene and how he cold-bloodedly killed that man, but aside from that, nothing really stood out about the character or the performance. I am so glad, however, that Jyn and Cassian did not kiss before their deaths. Their feelings for each other were alluded to, but I feel like the hug at the end, both the audience and the characters knowing it's the end for them, was more powerful than a kiss. I thought Galen Erso's stance was really admirable, and Mads Mikkelsen's continues to be a devilishly handsome man. Orson Krennic was a pretty good villain with a glorious costume and cape. When he lined up all the engineers and Galen came forward as the mole, I knew he was still gonna kill everyone because that's what every villain ever does. But I absolutely loved the irony as his great weapon was the thing that brought his own demise. Darth Vader cameos in the film. When he first showed up, his costume seemed very highbrow Party City-ish for a 2016 movie. It just really threw me off as this is supposed to be a menacing guy. I couldn't get over how his helmet didn't connect to his body when he turned. For A New Hope in the 1970s, obviously they didn't have amazing costume material, and I think it worked better in A New Hope because of the grainy footage output by the cameras back then, but now with the high resolution it just looks like some fan cosplay. But I loved his action sequence at the end because it reminded me of how much of a badass he actually is, and it actually really felt like it came out of A New Hope. I also really liked the scene where Darth Vader was in the bacta tank, and I don't remember there being like one of those title cards that said what planet it was, but was that planet Darth Vader was on Mustafar? If any of you know if they explained that in any of the other lore like comics or books, that would be great to know. But I saw lava, so I thought Mustafar, and the only explanation I could think of as to why they would not put that in the title card is because they are trying to stray away from the prequels. All the other characters played their part but were pretty forgettable. I thought Riz Ahmed's character Bodhi Rook would be another Poe Dameron, but he ended up kind of fading in the background and said things and did things just as needed. Donnie Yen's friend was a great shot and had a cool weapon, but that's really all I remembered about him. However, the restoration of Peter Walsh's face for Grand Moff Tarkin was beautifully done. So well that I didn't even realize it was a restoration. I knew the actor had passed, but I thought that they had found an actor who looked similarly like him. That's how flawless it was. I wasn't too recently familiar with Peter's exact features, which is why it kinda caught me off guard at first, but it's just so amazing to think how far technology has come. However, I knew Carrie Fisher and I was familiar with how she looked in the original trilogy, so when she popped up at the end I was like, there's no possible way that someone looks exactly like Carrie Fisher, and I knew right away it was a digital recreation. However, even looking back at Peter Walsh's digital recreation, something about Carrie Fisher stands out more that gives it away that it was CGI'd. It still was really well done, but it just seemed more digital than Grand Moff Tarkin's. But what I love about seeing Leia is what time frame it puts Rogue One at and how it connects it to the rest of Star Wars. I personally at first thought the film took place a couple of years before A New Hope, but it's only about a couple of hours, which just seems so perfectly well done. There's no better way to put it. Sitting in the theater, as soon as I saw those rebel troopers, Darth Vader, and that distinctive ship, I was thinking, are they gonna do it? Is this gonna lead into A New Hope? And they did, and it was just so awesome. And I think personally the best decision this film made, and the best direction to go into. Because of the film's strong emphasis on hope, it also gives a new perspective to the meaning of the title, A New Hope, and how it pans out with the rest of the saga. I do wish there were more prominent aliens in the film. You have that great first scene where Cassian is at that trading post and you see all these different aliens and diverse creatures, but after that there's only a small few trickled throughout the movie and only in the background. The imagery is great. Even though this film isn't a traditional Star Wars movie, it feels most like A New Hope, which it obviously segues into, but because it's not a traditional Star Wars movie, the imagery really does help to make it feel like it takes place in a Star Wars universe. The CGI was also magnificent, but what I really love is the attention to detail. How the girl who played young Jyn Erso actually looked like a mini version of Felicity Jones. Or the well-placed Easter eggs like when Jyn bumps into the criminals Luke later has trouble with at the Mos Espa Cantina. The battle at the end is also just pure amazing. I love the X-Wing fighting, that was just so well done, and how coherently you had the troops fighting on the ground. That end battle scene was just so beautifully made. I also love how this film answers some questions people have had, even ones proposed due to this film. Like, how are AT-ATs in this movie if in episode 5 they were unknown to the rebels? Well, basically everyone dies, so everyone who witnessed the AT-ATs is dead and cannot be witness to the AT-ATs being a thing. Also, the biggest question ever in the history of Star Wars, other than why anyone would ever release the prequels, is why would anyone compromise themselves by putting a small reactor port for some lucky pilot to shoot at and destroy your ultimate weapon? And the answer being that that was on purpose and an action taken by Galen to compromise the Death Star. Because of how close Rogue One and A New Hope are time-wise, the Empire could never have found the compromise on time by doing a manual search, and they couldn't look at the plans because they were only stolen a couple hours ago. And it emphasizes the immenseness of the events of A New Hope, with the rebels having to take out the Death Star before it can do any more damage. Also, if you're wondering why they don't use these guys after this movie, it's because they're only slightly better shots than the normal stormtroopers, and I'm sure their uniforms cost more money to make. So after the Empire took their major loss of their data outpost, I'm sure they had to make some budget cuts and let those guys go. It is never explained in the film why they have them or their purpose, which is something I would have liked, but also if we're being real, they have them there because it's for merchandise purposes, so Disney can sell more merch, because no matter how bad you are as a character, if you have a cool design like these black stormtroopers, you're gonna be some cool merch. I don't know how well that worked for Captain Phasma, but she was just unforgivably bad. But maybe she'll be redeemed in episode 8, or maybe they should just do a Days of Future Past to erase that whole travesty of a film that is The Force Awakens. It's just such a disappointment after seeing Rogue One and seeing that we could have gotten a film of that caliber, but instead we got the politically correct copy and paste version of A New Hope. Anyway, I digress. I cannot stress enough how much I love Rogue One. It's up there with episode 5. Because I have to rewatch episode 5, I can't say which I like better, but Rogue One is certainly up there. Rogue One is a great experience and I'd recommend it to anyone. Acting wise, I have to give the film a 7 out of 10. I thought each performance was done well, but outside of a few standout characters, there was nothing really magnificent. Because of the rough beginning, I also have to give the film a 7 out of 10 in the editing department. Visuals is a 10 out of 10, as well as rewatchability. And story wise, just because of a few cliches and moments that either dragged on or went by too fast, I give the film an 8 out of 10, which averages out to be a 4.3 out of 5 or an 8.6 out of 10. I've never seen a movie twice in the theater, but I do plan on seeing Rogue One again just for the beautifully crafted third act and that ending. This film is filled with nostalgia and a great addition to the Star Wars universe. Let me know what you thought about Rogue One in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe for more reviews, speculations, and discussions of your favorite movies. Leave a like on the video, add it to your favorites, etc, etc. And I am trying to get on a better schedule. Either my review of Assassin's Creed or my Where Suicide Squad Went Wrong video will be out next. So stay tuned and I will see you guys in the next video. Uncensored Gnome, signing out. When he first showed up, his costume seemed very highbrow Party City-ish.